agricultural vernacular types of buildings, industrial. So it is not only restricted only with the residential. We move on to the other typology of buildings also. So these are some of the industrial vernacular buildings. Look at the image of the facades being used, the materials being used. And comes the religious at different contexts. So if you go to each and every area, depending upon the climate, it varies. The materials used varies. Look at the vernacular elements being adopted in different places of religious across the world. So moving on to the next influences, like one of the first factor which we need to consider, one of the most important significant influences on vernacular is the macro climate of the area. The immediate climate or the macro climate is the most important factor, which is which will influence the vernacular architecture. For example, I'll give you one example. The buildings in cold climate, they invariably have very high thermal mass or the significant amount of insulation. So these are usually sealed in order to prevent the heat loss, and openings such as windows tends to be very small or non-existent sometimes. So they're usually sealed in order to prevent the heat loss. So according to the macro climate, in this case, the cold winds, they are usually sealed in order to prevent the heat loss and openings. So such as windows tend to be very small or non-existent. When you take the buildings in warm climates, in contrast to that, they tend to be constructed of lighter, using the lighter materials to allow significant cross ventilation in the building, openings in the fabric of the building. So we have a single building, a shelter, but it differs very drastically in terms of the macro climate of the area. So furthermore, the buildings for the continental climate, we look into two contrasting climate, the cold and the hot. So we talk about the temperature here, the variations in the temperature. So we talk about the temperatures of climate that constitutes of both. So there is a significant variations in the temperature and may be altered by the occupants according to the season. So here you can see the image of the African dwelling unit. If you notice, the whole unit is lifted from the ground to keep away from the dampness of the soil and also to catch the wind. If you look at the roof, it is totally pitched, which means it is designed in order to act to the rain that prevails in that particular condition, in that particular climate. Further, buildings take different forms depending on the precipitation in the region, as I said, the rains, leading to the dwelling on the stilts in many regions. Again, if you go to different regions, they might be having some stilt as with a frequent flooding in that region or rainy monsoon season. As much as you want to keep the dampness of your dwelling unit, it is lifted off the floor in order to deal with the floods. So the flat roofs, generally, they go with the flat roofs. The rare areas in which they have high levels of precipitation, where there is rain, they always go with the pitch roof, which means that there is always a direct impact of the climate. So depending upon the climate, depending upon that particular area, the climate acts as a major influence, and this plays an important role, and which is a major influencing factor. So climate influences on vernacular architecture. So it is not simple as it is in the coldness or the heat of the climate. It can vary depending upon the complex. So for example, the Mediterranean vernacular and much of the Middle East often includes a courtyard with a fountain or a pond. So this here again, we pay attention to the air cooled by the water, the evaporation, the building, using the natural ventilation. The fresh air comes in, the hot air is driven up, and the cold air enters in. So these are some of the examples to show how the climate plays an important role and acts as a major influencing factor. So you would always look at it. So here, the climatic influences on vernacular architecture can be extremely complex also sometimes. Only by the trial and error method over the different generations, we can see a lot of things improving. So we have seen that most of the vernacular architecture is being learned through the trial and error method only. So all these techniques are derived from learning by the mistakes and finding out if they work out or they won't work. So they are learned by trial and error, often existing long before the scientific theory which explained why they work. So we have been able to explain how they work only now, but back when they are able to experience the impact of each technique and answer directly or correct if necessary. So moving on to the next influence, we will look into the culture. So culture, as I said, the way of the building occupants, the appearance of the vernacular building, how they decorate the building is very important here. The culture has a great influence in the appearance of vernacular building. So they often relate to the local custom and the belief. You can look at the image here. So this is an image from an Agraharam in South India. If you look at it, you will see the various influences that social culture have on the architectural building. The building has a higher plinth in the front. You can look at the image. This is the place where people sit and talk, which they call it as a tinai. They recite prayers. They have community discussions. Other than that, it can be a place to sleep during the hot afternoon for guests or for people who are staying there. Then you also have some decoration that depict that people are inviting the neighbors over. You can look at the decorations being done with regard to some special occasion or something, some special festival area. So this is all about the cultural influence. So next is one, we will talk about a special case called the nomads. So these days, travel isn't that much of consideration in terms of living places as we move from one place to the another. But those days, vernacular architecture had an impact on nomads as well. So these are the people who move from one place to the other. They carried around their own living spaces. They also add to the variety in vernacular architecture. There are many cultures around the world which include some aspect of nomadic life, and they've all developed vernacular solution for the need of the shelter. That is a major need. Only for the need of the shelter, they keep moving to one place to the other. So nomadic life has been a way of occupation, a way of living for many people. They've been carrying their shelter or their vernacular solution for the shelter, or have been varied according to that. So all these include the appropriate response to the climate, the custom, the practicalities of the simple construction of the huts. If necessary, they have to transport all such tent or houses. So the basic idea of vernacular is to be simple, cheap, and the kind that can be done easily. So wherever you go, wherever you live, they simply make their dwelling as they want. So many nomadic people use materials common in the local environment to construct temporary dwellings. Like say, for example, is a Punan of Sarawak, where they use palm fronds. So these people, as they move around, they use materials that are available at the place where they move around. Another example is a Ichuri Paijamis, where they use the saplings and the monango leaves to construct their own domed huts. So they use whatever is available nearby. They dismantle it and carry it around. So other cultures reuse material, transporting them with them as they move. Here's a picture of how people move from one place to place and also carry most of their living. So this is the life of a nomad. So is it clear about what we are looking into it? Are you all able to understand? Or should I stop anywhere? I'm sorry, I actually didn't look into the chat option. I'm just looking into it. If you need any clarification, you can let me know. Someone has asked about the last slide. I don't know which slide it is. Maybe I can share the presentation with you all. You can just take a look at it. I will definitely post the presentation in the Google Classroom. Kema. Yeah, by today, definitely I will do that. So can I continue? Is it clear what we are studying? Because I've been continuously talking and I don't see any kind of interaction or any kind of response. I mean, you're all just listening and taking down notes, I guess. So any clarification still, whatever we have done till now? Can I proceed? Shall I proceed? Or any clarification still whatever been taught? Because the next we move on to is the components of vernacular architecture. Before moving to it, I want your response. Or someone can unmute and talk, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The rest can also reply in the chat box. Okay. I assume that you understand what is being taught. Okay. So I will move on to the next one, which is the components of vernacular, where we have seen the influences, the factors affecting vernacular. Now we will look into the components. So what makes vernacular architecture? When you talk about vernacular, when you look at it, there are certain components that characterize the vernacular. The first thing that comes on the list is a construction technique. So you need to look at the walling material being used, the constructions, foundations, the roofing shape, the materials being used. All these are an important aspect or an important component of vernacular architecture. Next comes the cultural background. So looking into the cultural background, we need to know the geographical location and the evolution of it. So we just looked or read about culture and how it affects the vernacular architecture. So this is also an important component. The planning, how it is going to be documented through plans, the sectional forms, show how the internal arrangement of the buildings are done, how they are revealed on the exterior, the planning and the settlement pattern, which is also all these are important component of the vernacular architecture, as it is going to be the further extension of a single dwelling unit of a vernacular architecture. Next, moving on to the next component is the architectural detail. We talked about the visual aspects of vernacular that forms an important part of architecture. The detailing, the windows, the staircases, the external and internal ornamentation done, all becomes forms a part of it. So other data like place, time, context, user group, the use of it also becomes an important component, because we need to know where we are doing it, at what time is it being documented, where is it located, who are the user groups, and what is going to be the use. So looking into all these components, these play an important role. When we have to look at vernacular, we should be able to study it. So how we do the study of vernacular architecture? There is this particular process in which you evaluate vernacular architecture or settlement in order to understand. So the study of vernacular environment leads to the need to acknowledge the range of forces acting on a particular society that prompts the regional building pattern, the spatial adjustment, the meaning to it. So on the structural model, if you take, these are all the collective forces described as the regional filters. Let's say, for example, among these forces, climate, culture, social, racial, or historical, all these are the important factors. So how we are going to moving on to the next one, how we are going to study the vernacular architecture. There are certain methods which we need to follow, so that we'll be able to apply it in the further study. So they have some systematic method in which we study the vernacular. So this is nothing but what we do for a rural study during an architectural graduation. When you do your architectural rural study, this is something very similar, but with respect to the vernacular architecture type. The first thing we need to is to identify the site. Site is very important. So when you, as an architect, when we go, we look into the site first. The scope of any study must be identified very clearly. You need to look into the geographical area, should be demarcated properly in that particular area. When we move into the study of vernacular of a particular region, we mark an area and go forward in order to study the aspects of it. That makes the vernacular architecture. Then we move on to the building type. So the typologies in the study area to be carefully analyzed. So this starts with the analysis from a single residential unit. Then you go to the buildings in the community, cultural and industrial way. So when you take vernacular architecture study, you'll be talking about the dwelling units put together. Then you'll talk about a group of dwelling units, and then you'll talk about the community. That is how the building type evolves. So that is what is the evolution. The settlement. Then comes the settlement and the various other aspects of it, which affects or shapes the vernacular architecture. The period of the study is also very important. When you're doing the study, so architecture, other than being affected by climate, social, and the other cultural aspect, it is also affected by the era in which it is placed. When as this happened, you need to know the timeline, what has happened before. So the period of the study is very important. Architecture, other than being affected by climate, it's also affected by an era, which it is where it is placed. So this is a vernacular architecture type that would come after the Industrial Revolution, would be different from the ones during the Stone Age and the ones using during the previous time, the ones before that. So the period of the study is very important, as I said, which impacts which has an impact on the built form, which has an impact on the architectural style, etc. So moving on to the next one is the methodology in which you study the vernacular. So the main important study, how you do the methodology of the study is done at the 4 levels. One, the extensive recording. The 2 is the intensive recording. You also study a socio-economic study, and you do the visual study. So this is similar to what you did in your rural study. So extensive study, as you can see, we have done a detail on more on the physical and the physical specific level. So we do the socio-economic study, which is that affects the architecture. So last but not least, we also do the visual impact that these things, in order to understand better what other aspects went on to making the vernacular architecture. So here We also do a detailed documentary study, which includes a historical survey, the archaeological survey, the documentary evidences. You need to take the title deed, the revenue department, go into the revenue department, etc. So you can see the extensive recording, meaning that you define the area, the boundary, you mark, you use a survey material, decide on the typology, whether it is going to be an individual or a group or cluster of building, identify the building, house address. So all these are the procedures in which we go about the extensive recording of documentation. Mark the orientation aspect, landmark, study the material usage, classify and identify the construction materials used, take some photograph, do some sketches. Dates of survey is very important for the future references. Going on to the intensive, it's nothing but going into the planning level, the spatial planning level, the section, the elevation, the detailing, the compilation of all the prepared drawings together, make the preparation of the scale drawing to a suitable scale. Then you'd go into the drawing level. Use a proper scale, proper size of the sheet. You need to draw appropriate the title with the drawing number, drawing date, north point, scale. All these are very important. So all these are the methods or methodology in which we do the intensive recording, enlarging the details to a scale, appropriate lettering. Then comes the documentary, like what I said, the archaeological survey, the title deed, the properties, the revenue department, etc. Here you can see, you can look at the images. We'll talk about the vernacular architecture in India. Indian vernacular architecture is always, it's an informal, functional architecture of structure. Always we look into the functional way. It's not something, that would prevail in a more urban space or even in a town for that matter. It's more prevalent in rural India. That you walk into a rural area today in India, you'll be able to witness this direct form of vernacular architecture. Like you can see the image itself, it is in the rural area only. It is found often in the rural area of India, built of local material and designed to meet the needs of the local people. Everything is of local with respect to the area or the region. If you take these structures which reflect the rich diversity of India's climate. So we all know India has a climate that varies on four direction, north, south, east, and west. The vernacular architecture is a direct reflection of that, using the locally available materials, integrating into the local social customs, craftsmanship, etc. So you can look at this image again. There's more direct impact and it gives a variety of vernacular architecture types of India. So it is vernacular. You will understand more into the locally available materials use, a basic level of aesthetics, the visual impact it has on the rural architecture, etc. So moving on to the vernacular scenario to understand more. So vernacular architecture can be simply defined as of relating to or characteristic of a particular period, place, or group, especially of relating to the common building style of a period or a place. So this again is the same different variation of the vernacular architecture. When you take the Western culture, where the vernacular often denotes a pioneer construction and architecture, you talk about the West vernacular is more simpler, more confined, but in India it leads to a variety of building types. The vernacular in India denotes always low cost. If you take India, it's always a low cost traditional village and small town settlement where construction is carried out without the help of any architect and any professional, where building activity is regulated by a long tradition and for many centuries. Unlike architects having to deal with buildings were also built by people themselves, by generation of family, as I said. So this is an example of a Kerala building. You can see the image. There's a direct impact of both the religious, climatic, and the socio-cultural aspects. Moving on to the vernacular settlement. So right till now we've been studying this particular building, vernacular building in India. So vernacular settlement, if you take, it often takes on the shape and the form that is dictated by the climate. It also has factors that influence the vernacular, and it can't be any different in India. It's more complex and different in India. The socio-cultural norms are designed to preserve and protect. The village settlement, if you take an example in Uttaranchal, this is often characterized by the house of stone, timber, and mud mortar on the slope, depending upon that particular area climate. They often use these materials, of course, rubble masonry, designed to, because it's a cold region, to design off the cold, they use all such material. So this is Uttaranchal in the north, where there are cold winds. To keep off the cold with the shelter, the animals below the main house, the heat is given off by much animals. keep the house above further. So they have this house lifted above the ground. They have it sealed to keep it away from the cold. So even the animals, they give up heat and add to the building's heat. Further examples are in the Kerala. If you take, village houses are slope roofed with mangrove tiles and patches to draw off the rain again. You know the Kerala, it's a God's own country. It always has a rain there and it's very beautiful. It is a main aspect that they have to deal with in terms of vernacular. In Assam, if you take, again, the same houses are built on stilt to counter off the damp ground. In Kerala, there are backwaters, but in Assam, the water settles down on the soil, which makes it really damp. Hence, it is needed to lift off from the ground. You can see the variation between each region that gives off various building types. In each and every region, it will vary. So next we move on to Punjab. Again, Punjab, if you take where the whitewash on the outside walls helps to cool down the summer heat. So Punjab is really hot and extremely cold during the winter, which makes it more complex. So they have a whitewash on the outside walls to make sure that heat is reflected off and taken in the building. So in each case, we see that vernacular architecture in India, diverse region have evolved a unique way of responding to the climate, the environment that is more sustainable, etc. It also shows an intelligent approach to the climate, a balance of social and cultural factor like walls, courtyards, floors, semi-private space, private space, going into the spatial planning. So this has a direct effect, direct impact on the spaces that are created. So when you talk about the dwelling unit, spaces that make up the dwelling unit is very important. So each and every aspect we need to concentrate upon: the climate, the cultural, the religious aspect, the materials used, and how these materials affect the space accordingly. So climate, as I said, is a predominant factor in determining the forms of vernacular architecture in India. Climate varies in each and every region in India. Again, depending upon each and every country, even each and every state, it varies. So Kerala, again, it's a direct response of precipitation where the main idea is to drain the water off. So we talked about the climate. This is an example of the Kerala image. We talked about the climate. Moving on to the geography, which is also a very important factor which shapes up the vernacular architecture. It can vary from one hilly terrain at the Kashmir to the Deccan in the south, and the Assam, the Bengal, it varies. So the third factor is availability of material. So we talked about the climate and geography. Next one is the material availability, which will again vary across different countries. In Goa, if you take, and Karnataka, there are abundance of red laterite stones. So this chooses a medium of choice for vernacular. So they will go with this material for construction. In North India, if you take, it's a clayey soil, which makes the sun burnt. Again, the sunburnt bricks and the mud mortar is commonly used medium. Bamboo construction can be found in the northeast. The roof tile with the so-called mangalore tiles, which we use in the south. And then we go with the sandstone in the Jaipur, which is a famous pink city. We go with the sandstone, which is readily available. So when these are different types of materials, the deserts have stones that can be used to make the architecture fully stony. So if you go back to the 17th century Mughal period, Mughal buildings, you tend to see many old materials being used in that particular context. So now moving on to this was a totally different way of having the context of vernacular architecture in India. So this happened, an interesting theory that holds a material varied according to the caste system. So white stone, if you take, is apparently used only by the Brahmins. Red by the Kshatriyas. Yellow is used by the Vaishyas. So all these history talks about it. So each and every material is being used depending upon the caste system also. The black stone is used by the Shudras. So we have this caste system that used to dictate the building material that were used to build the local building. The Indian vernacular is a true representation of all the people, the culture, the diverse heritage, and all gives us a fascinating study about the entire thing. So moving on to the next type, Indian vernacular architecture, it's always categorized into 3 different types. You would have definitely studied this, and you would have definitely come across this in your rural study also. You would have identified which is a kacha building, which is a pakka building, and which is a semi-pakka building. So kacha, as we all know, it is a building made of natural materials like mud, grass, bamboo, etc. And it is very cheap and easily available. So you can look at the image of a kacha building used in the villages in the rural area. Pakka building, as we all know, it's a structure made of material resistant to wear, the clay tile being used, and such structures are expensive to construct as well. They are elaborately decorated. You can look at the Pakka structure of buildings being used. And semi-Pakka, in between the Kacha and the Pakka style, is semi-Pakka houses, where they use the elements of the construction of the durable materials. This is an example of the semi-Pakka building. So in the region, again, as I said, in each and every region, the materials used varies. So if you take in the south, the clay tiles are used for Pakka roofing, whereas in the plant materials like coconut palm is used in the Kacha region. This is an example of an image to show. And apart from the rural vernacular, we also go with the urban vernacular. We also see some vernacular buildings in the urban area. This is an example of an Adambakkam temple, which is a Chennai suburb. It is an example of an urban vernacular. You can see an old Ahmedabad street. This is an example of an urban vernacular. All these are examples of the urban vernacular. The slums. Commercial also, sometimes commercial vernacular is also there. In the Kullu Manali, if you go, the roadside restaurant is a commercial vernacular type example. The restaurant at Bangalore, the roadside, the bazaar in the Bangladesh, all these are examples of the commercial vernacular. So I think we'd stop with this for today because time is 11 now. Am I fast, or are you all clear about what we saw today? Did you all understand about what we are studying? Is it clear? I think for today's class, we'll stop with this and then we continue with the next part of the principles of how the vernacular design, principles of architecture is being adopted. We'll quickly start this in the next class and then continue with the next part. Only this is left out. Since it's 11, I'll stop here for today. So I request you all to please open up and talk and ask if any doubts or clarifications done for whatever is being taught today. Yes, class, I request you all to at least reply in the chat box or unmute yourself. Yes, anybody?
Ma'am, your voice is breaking, ma'am.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Ma'am, your voice is breaking, ma'am.
Now? Can you hear me now?
It's audible, ma'am.
Pardon me?
It's audible. We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, is it clear what we studied now? Whatever I showed you, the presentation, are you all able to understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Any clarifications or anything which you don't understand or you want me to stop anywhere? Clarify again. Anything? Any suggestions or anything if you don't like? I mean, if you don't understand today's class, or did you all understand what we studied and what approach we looked into each and every topic? Okay, so I assume that you all, I get some reply from the chat box. I assume that you all understand. I will introduce the first assignment to you. I want each and every one of you, or as a group, you can decide among yourself. Please take some works of any architects like Charles Correa or Le Corbusier or Raphael Wright, or any architect. I'm just giving you these three examples and how they approach towards their design with respect to vernacular values. So you need to look into their works in approach to design with respect to vernacular values. You understand? I'll just post it in the chat box. You can decide your group. How many ever you want, you can form a group. Tell me the group names and the architect which you're going to choose. The pioneer, like take an example of a pioneer architect who has been involved in the vernacular